So, hello everybody, and thanks for coming tonight, all of you. I must confess I'm a little anxious about presenting on the topic of holding a successful practice. I'd rather lay myself open to comments from people who've been to my practices. I've been to one of our practices and I didn't think it was that good. I've also been buoyed up by some of the previous webinars this week. Thanks, Sonia, for your plug last night. So in order to cover myself a bit and reassure myself, I recently posted on Facebook groups for other people's views on what they thought made for a good practice. So the slides you see tonight and what I say reflects my thinking, what I've read and tutored about, but also your views. And I can see some of you Facebook posters are here tonight. One of you actually posted that you'd been visiting another tower and come out of what you'd thought was an awful practice and overheard someone else saying how good it was. So one person can love it and another loathe it. This is one thing to take on board, actually. You can't please everybody all the time. We're only human. The fact you're here listening tonight shows that we all try our best and we want to do better. So how to start? We talk about practices, but we're all in different situations with the practices we look after. I run the practices for an 8-bell tower where I have a band of about 15 core people. They ring at the other 2 towers in the benefice too, so we have one shared band between us. On a good night, I can get up to 20 people in the tower, but sometimes it can be as few as 6 or 7. I say on a good night, but actually it's much easier to have a good practice when there are fewer people. You can target the needs of specific people and achieve real progress. You're usually not trying to cater for all abilities, and any more advanced people you have can be asked to conduct or to help actively with the teaching. Learners, they get multiple goes at the thing they're trying to crack, and nobody feels guilty at a load of other people sat out waiting. Repetition is a very good thing to do if time allows, and with a small practice, you're usually able to do that. You can say to the learner, have a look at that and we'll ring that again later. And it gives them much more chance of having a successful experience. Practices with lots of people are the most challenging to run. We did a survey of our association last month. So I belong to the Ely Association. We wanted a sort of state of the nation baseline picture. We asked towers how many people they had to their practice and their age range and things like that. One at 8-bell tower, the winners, if you like, had a band of 31 people. And I immediately thought, gosh, that must be a hard practice to manage. I asked one of the band afterwards, I rang her up and asked why she chose to go to that practice and what she got out of it. Things she said included no shouting, no belittling. Everybody's asked what they'd like to ring. They accommodate everyone from learners to splice prize major. The variety of methods is challenging to her, and they do a new method of the week, and they often get 16 people learning it and wanting to learn it, wanting to ring it at the next practice. So that level of engagement is great, but itself leads to a management problem in you either ring the method twice or some people have to sit out. But talking to her, the thing I picked out most of all and that underlaid everything she said was that she enjoyed spending time with the band. They did loads of social things together, including going on holiday. Now, having been at yesterday's webinar with Sonia, getting back at you, you see, Sonia, I'm thinking that this person is demonstrating the advanced person's focus on fun and the social side of ringing, and that it may not be the same if I'd asked one of the learners at the band. Practices with lots of people need to be organised really tightly, warning people what the next touch will be in advance and telling people what bell they'll be ringing maybe, so they get up and get on with it when you ask for them to ring. If there's a very diverse ability range, it's very challenging, but you can achieve things for multiple people in one touch if you're careful. So having a learner on the treble to triples with a good stander behind her and somebody else calling, a simple touch. It can work if you have a deputy assistant who can greet people as they come in the door and ask them what they want to ring, and refine this list for you and feed you the information. But you have to be used to working together and know that you can work like that. District practices, where you don't necessarily know all the people or what they've been learning, can be trickier still. Try having a whiteboard up. Invite people to write down what they'd like to ring, and others waiting can see the list too. Latecomers have to make do with what they're offered, as you can't rejig things just for them. So I would err on the side of not even asking them what they want to ring. They'll just have to fit in, and mostly they realise that and don't get annoyed. You're lucky actually to get in more than about 8 touches in an hour and a half's practice. Often if you ring surprise, it's fewer than that. So there's a limit to how many people you can individually cater for, giving that prime touch. Large, randomly attended practices are my least favourite to run, I have to say. You have to be agile, on your toes, and at the end, you're knackered. Hopefully, many of you have been indulging in these ringing room practices. And I hope that towers will use them even after they've gone back to the tower. For quick, focused practices without the time taken to travel, get bells up, etc., ringing room's ideal. Allows learners to use cheat sheets, and why not? After a time, they'll dispense with those. They don't get into the habit of it, it's fine. But meanwhile, they get the shape and the feel of whatever you're trying to teach them without the distraction of the bell handling. Actually, I believe it's valid for you to have a cheat sheet too if you need it. You might not have a good conductor with you, or actually conductors find it hard conducting on ringing room, and maybe you have to do it. If you call for Stedman or something like that at a district ringing room practice and you've no idea of people's abilities or their experience on ringing room, if you have the grid in front of you for Stedman, you can maybe just whip in there and tell people to lead again, and then you make the touch succeed for everybody else, rather than have it fail just because one person had forgotten they were leading. I think that's valid. You're enabling success. Kids, sort of nirvana, getting kids ringing. Well, what have I learned about practices for kids? Many of you will have more experience at this than I have. I did an active recruitment campaign because our church is next door to the village primary school. And together with our band secretary, I booked a visit to talk to the headmistress and arranged for the top class to come to the church for an afternoon. So we prepared some talks and practical sessions, listening, have a go at the bells, music and bell ringing, maths and bell ringing, and it was good fun. The village is small, so the classes are mixed age. So we were talking to 9 and 10-year-olds. And I think that's a good age, actually. I prefer the 10-year-olds, but sometimes you'll get a very juvenile lad and a very mature lass. Generalising there, but you know what I mean. They vary a lot. At the end of the afternoon, about a dozen kids out of the 26 in the class said they were interested in taking it further. And we booked 4 weekly after-school club sessions at 4 p.m. on a Friday. And at the end of that, the 4 weeks, we had 7 kids ready to continue ringing with the band. Now, it took a lot of organising to get enough handling teachers to help me. 4 p.m. on a Friday, it's not ideal for everybody, and to get them 4 weeks in a row. But I needed kids on the end of a rope, not sitting out. They only had an hour. So I had to get people there to help me with handling. And after that, I needed 3 or 4 helpers every session, with at least 2 sessions a week. I couldn't leave it to just a weekly session. Now, not everybody you ask is comfortable teaching kids. So make sure you can source these helpers before you commit to anything big with the school. I have to say, though, we all got a lot better at teaching handling with our experience of teaching kids. You had to be absolutely, your wits sharpened up, ready for anything. They didn't listen, they didn't watch what you're doing, They just grabbed hold of the rope, and after about 6 pulls, they got what you're trying to say to them. It was good fun. It's very quick. Now, big takeaways for me, you've actually got twice as many people to deal with than you have learners, because you have to enthuse the parents as much as the kids. They provide the transport. So without getting them enthused, you won't have the kids to teach. And you have to give the parents a goal, if you like, i.e. getting the kids good enough to have a kids only band to ring for a school event or a service. If your kids don't proclaim terminal busyness, teach them to ring too if you can. Often they need to look after younger kids at home though, but you don't want to just end up being their creche, so beware. You need managers and mums as much as ringing teachers if you have numerous kids learning together. Now, this picture's trying to say, make sure that you have some nice, jolly, normal people ready to talk to the kids. You know what I mean. Parents like to see their kids in good hands. Actually, I think the kids wouldn't mind being taught by a gorilla. Everything has to happen much more quickly at kids' practice. Keep your sessions short, so even shorter than you think. Half the length of what you do for teaching an adult, if not even shorter. Your ringing round session, you just want to ring long enough for them to get successful rounds and then stop. Don't push it. Plan. You have to let them know what they're going to learn, and they expect something new each week. They don't expect to be learning the same things every week. Oh, we're putting strokes together again. They are used to lesson plans, and even if you aren't, so give them a bit of homework to do, just a little, but think up your progression, what you're going to focus on, at least at the start of the lesson with the kids, even if you end up just putting strokes together. Keep it fun. We need lots of games. I don't know if you can see the writing at the top there, it's disappeared on my screen, but this is a sheet of some of the things that we go through on the ART Module 2, where you can practice a lot of these things. One of the things I've learned, kids like games. So I'm thinking of things like ringing facing outwards, Mexican wave, switcheroo. Anyone that was at Claire McCardle's talk will have had that explained. Ring a tune. There's Twinkle Twinkle listed here, but there are other ones. Work it out. What can you ring on 6 bells? The standing game. This was one of our favourites. You go around the band and take it in turns to pick a number. Everybody has to ring rounds for that number of rows and then set the bell without anyone saying stand. So they've got to count, which is really difficult, and then they've got to stand, and the bogey, of course, is standing at backstroke. And the people with the most successes wins. One of our kids loved getting people to stand at backstroke, so he would always pick the number, the smallest number that he could, so either 2 or 1. And in the end, his name was Mungo. In the end, we called it doing a Mungo, which was basically pulling off and setting at backstroke straight away in one blow. The more difficult version is to make it progressive. So everybody has to move 1 bell round each time, and make sure you move anti-clockwise so that you move from the treble to the tenor rather than the other way. Otherwise, disaster might strike. You can get very early adult learners or children involved with this by just letting them ring 1 stroke. You ring the hand stroke and they ring the backstroke. So if the number means that they've got to set at backstroke, it's their responsibility, and otherwise it's your own. You're a sort of composite participant that gets them involved. The Whiting Society have got another couple of games good for promoting rope sight and bell control. One of them's shown here. And as I said, the ART Module 2 gives you plenty more games. Other things I've learned, kids like games. They're often competitive, and kids like chocolate. Adults, a lot of them anyway, like games also. A lot of adults are competitive. Games improve adults' bell handling as well as kids. So having kids at your practice is good for your adults. Mix them all up. I also learned that some adults hate kids. So what worked best for me in the end was to have the kids practice from 6:30 to 7:30 with the help of 4 or 5 adults initially. Then other adults arrived and we had some time all together doing things like the standing game. Then the kids left and more adults arrived for the adults only practice. So I'm not really talking here about kids who are the offspring of your existing band. But if you have any like that, don't forget to do something fun for them too. Don't just treat them like mini adults just because they've been used to how ringing practices work since birth. With our bands, one kid led to another, and I acquired numerous younger siblings, although none of these actually stuck. No teenage girl wants their younger sister around, I found out. So, a warning, don't get into having to engage with the kids' social lives. Who was in, who wasn't. Keep the energy focused on the ringing and don't leave them too much time to get giggly and chatty by themselves in the corner. You have to manage this, and the more children you have, the more you need the odd helper or parent who can control that sort of behaviour. I'm beginning to sound a bit negative about kids, and I'm not, but just realise what you're taking on. It's more than just teaching them ringing. Kids are great, they enliven the whole evening, make your practice a bit more fun. They encourage you to share ways of explaining things, everybody helps, and to interact more. They challenge you to think of new ways of doing things, be inventive, lighten up, and to be more organised. They're a good excuse to play those ringing games that get people good handling skills, and they can progress quickly, which is quite refreshing. We'll certainly do more recruiting at the school when ringing settled down again. And in fact, our tower has purchased a Matthew Higby dumbbell, a training bell. And it's now fitted with the rope coming down in one corner of our ringing chamber. And I look forward to being able to teach handling to kids on it with much less angst. Our treble seems to have a stay the size of a matchstick, so it's always a bit anxiety making. So we've got great plans for kids. Now, one technique I want to tell you about that I found particularly useful when I had a lot of kids at the same stage, but it goes for any group of learners at the same stage, was mirroring. Claire McArdle mentioned this on Sunday and called it shadowing. So I might have had 3 or 4 kids all ready to be learning plain hunt, say, but there's a limit on how much practice they could get in a 1-hour ringing practice. So what we did was tie the front 2 bells on my ring of 8 and ring the back 6. So you had one learner, the best one probably, ringing the treble of the back 6, and the other 2 learners ringing bells number 1 and 2, which are tied. And they were ringing those bells silently, as though they were ringing the treble, with helpers standing behind each, trying to help them with the rope sight. So what came out sound-wise wasn't them ringing, but they could learn to see what they were doing and also have some practice at the bell control required for hunting up and hunting down. So 3 kids got to practice plain hunting in one touch. You could as easily mirror the tenor covering. And if you have the right setup, try this. It's good fun and it's super productive. It's a way of giving learners at the same stage of ringing more rope time. It involves a bit of faffing around. You have to get the bells down in order to take ties off and then up again to resume the practice. But that's no bad thing, as few ringers get enough experience of ringing up and down. Which leads me on to practices with an overriding theme. So the people in this picture are about to ring up. So why not surprise people by devoting one of your weekly practices to something like raising and lowering? So everybody having a go and experienced people having a chance to treble up and down. When you're doing your theme practices, it's quite good to ring normal things in between the theme, so that people that have turned up on spec visitors don't suddenly find themselves doing something they don't want to do at all. So, and there's still the opportunity then for people to progress with things they've been learning. What about a practice focused on improving leading? You can all agree what good leading should sound like. Listen to it on phone, maybe. Especially the size of the hand stroke gap, that could do with the band having a consensus and talking about it so that everybody is aware of what they're trying to do. Work on the visual skills, maybe try leading with everybody facing out, change bells, do it again, use chord changes to bring different people down to the lead, pull off in different combinations. There's loads of things you could do in one practice. What about a chord changes practice? Normal chord changes, called up, called down, speedy chord changes. One of our kids was really good at this. She could whack them out. People were in awe of her ability to call chord changes. So get your experienced callers to call every 4 rows or less. Chord changes by places, that's a great one. So you'd say things like seconds with thirds, meaning whichever bell was in seconds place changed with whichever bell was in thirds place. They're quite easy to call those because you don't have to know which bell it is, but it's quite difficult to get them around. So things to learn both from the participants and whoever's calling it. The person calling it doesn't need to be actually ringing. One of the hardest things I tried with call changes is something that we kind of called negative call changes, where you actually call the bells that don't change place. Sort of call changes by place notation, if you like. So if you call, it's a bit of a mouthful, firsts, fourths, fifths, sixths, what people had to pick up from that is the bells in seconds and thirds had to swap. Okay, they weren't mentioned. If you said firsts and sixths, then the bells in seconds, thirds had to swap, and fourths and fifths had to swap. So the kids were much better at this than the adults were, but that's mainly because I gave them place notations to work out on the whiteboard when they weren't ringing. So have some fun with call changes. I think one of the Whiting Society publications talks about more of this, but I can't remember which one it is. I could find out. It's a huge laugh as well as educational. This is really important to the success of your practice and your band, and it involves you in devoting some time and to thinking about organisation and planning outside the practice. Think who may be there and what they want and need. All this points to knowing your ringers and agreeing with them what their ringing goals are. So here I'm talking about individual goals. You may have an idea in your head about what person is capable of and what you should get them to learn in order to achieve that. But have you thought to explicitly talk to them about it? You might be surprised to overhear them talking to someone else in the pub about grants and triples, and all you thought they'd aspire to was grants and doubles. Talk about it. This is a good pub conversation, or ring them up and meet them for coffee and map out a possible path for them. People really appreciate the attention and direction, and in the end, it makes running the practice easier for you. This is a bigger round. Have a plan for the band. Earlier I said you can't please everyone all the time. Well, that's not your job, actually. Your job is to take the people available to you and use them to progress the overall skills level of the band and help them achieve good ringing at whatever level of ringing is appropriate to them. People need to know what you're trying to achieve and what they're all aiming for. The feeling of achievement is more likely to lead them to them enjoying themselves and to be motivated to turn up to your next practice. The Facebook commenters agreed that there are 3 main things that people are looking for in a practice. Firstly, people are looking to spend time with people they like. Secondly, they want to benefit from the time spent by achieving something for themselves. Or thirdly, they want to have contributed to someone else's achievements. People want to make a difference. Your more experienced ringers get just as much out of helping people, but also think about them doing things like learning to conduct, share these duties around, and make sure actually that everybody's used to either saying Bob for a simple touch, or at least saying, go and stop for a plain course of something. People need to open their mouths and they quite enjoy having done it. It's an achievement. Others can be encouraged to take conducting further. It's fun for everybody to learn new methods and avoid stagnation. It makes sense if there's a structured approach to the methods being chosen, rather than just randomly kicking a football around, so to speak. So a bit of work learned in one method appears in the next method, and it's progressive. So an example of this is the pathways approach of Ringing World Diary Bellboard. Art, minor stepping stones, gives you a good sequence of methods to follow, and things like learning the rope plus. And of course, if you've got enough to ring surprise major, there's Simon Linford's pickled egg methods. They give a good progression. There's plenty of resources there to help you plan. So have a look at what's appropriate for your band and get going. Always announce what the target method is for that practice in advance. Other plans and goals for your band might be to ring a peal or a quarter peal in something, ring in a striking competition. There's all sorts of things, but you need something. More organisation and planning. Have a plan for the practice. I think that this is the most important thing that will make a positive difference to your practice. Have a plan and communicate it. Share what you're hoping to ring during the evening and try and manage expectations, but be flexible. Things happen. The people you rely on to ring something might not turn up. Debbie Phipps from Maltravers in Dorset, she was speaking on, was it Saturday or Sunday? But she gets all her band to complete a doodle poll each week to say whether they're coming to the practice. Great idea. May not work if you've got a practice with lots of visitors. When you finish the practice, make sure you've written down what you'll ring next practice. So plan ahead on the basis of the ringing you've just done. Write down what you want people to do for next time. Then, because you've written it down, you can make sure you actually ring it next time. It's part of your plan. So one of the good things about lockdown for those bands who've used Ringing Room is that learning theory and putting time in preparation for the practice has become normalised. We always used to moan, didn't we, about people never taking the bother to do homework. Well, now they do. So take advantage of this and give people homework and write down what you're giving them. I can honestly say that when I've not had time to plan and prepare for the practice, I'm busy at work or something like that, the practice is always the worse for it. If I've got a plan, even if 50% of it doesn't happen, it still leads to a much better practice. It's worth the effort. Place bands. Now, this was a really popular thing to be commented on in Facebook. You definitely want to avoid saying, grab hold for Grantzer, or something like that. And I would say place some, well, do some band placing. Some people on Facebook advocated always placing bands, place every person. You can try both, but certainly do more rather than less band placing. Placing bands helps you achieve what you want in the practice. It allows you to give someone a prime ring. Now, this is a term used in ART to mean that every developing ringer is given a touch specifically for them to enable them to achieve something towards their goals. You should put the strongest possible band around them, placed well, and certainly avoid putting other learners in that touch. But be careful how you use placing bands. Yes, you should place them. You can stop people grabbing bells that are too big or difficult for them, and you can stop people getting more than their fair share. But be careful that it doesn't show your unconscious bias about what you think certain people will do or can do. They can surprise you, even if you're correct 75% of the time. There's a message in where a person is placed or whether they're placed at all. I remember being at a practice 10 bell tower, and I think that we only had 10 people at the stage and the tower captain placed people on bells, and I was left till last. So I deduced I had the last rope there. And I remember feeling really put out about it, which is stupid, really, but I was. Sometimes you hear fill in those that are left, and it's a really kind of diminishing way of getting people to ring for you. This time, I think I talked to someone in the pub afterwards, and they'd said that, oh, the tower captain had meant that, well, Lesley could ring anywhere. It didn't have to be placed at the back or the front. And I felt a lot better about it then. So just be careful, the unintended consequences of what you say, unintended messages. So another example, if you ring a couple of touches of surprise and then you say, we'll ring a touch for little Bob for Jenny, make sure that Jenny hasn't secretly been looking up 3 leads of Cambridge all week. You can unwittingly always brand Jenny as the learner, even after she's been ringing for 10 years. And then the only way for her to get out from under this is to leave your tower. So be careful, place bands for positive reasons, to give strength and rhythm and to help prime rings succeed, but be aware of what you're doing. Maximise the ringing time. I think this was the thing that got top marks on Facebook. I had over 100 comments, so I had a lot of data. It was wonderful. And I totally agree with this one. I can't stand being in towers while there's a load of chat going on, especially if I'm a visitor. Start the practice on time. Even if there's only 2 or 3 people, there's always something you can do. Just don't waste time on chatting. You want to encourage a relaxed and welcoming practice, but actually people have come to ring and they may well have invested time in learning something and in travelling to be there. So announce what you're going to ring now, and then also announce what you're going to call for next. Then the people who that touch is for can start preparing themselves, and you avoid that last minute looking things up. Write it down. I've already said a bit about writing it down. Maybe you've got very good memory, but I have to write things down. So as well as writing down what you've asked people to prepare for next time, keeping a record of methods rung, maybe successes, failures, as well as the people who attended is a really good thing to do. You have to do the latter anyway, for safeguarding reasons if you've got any kids in the band, and maybe for COVID reasons. But keeping that extra detail about what you rang is really valuable. And when you look back and try and assess whether you're making progress towards the band's goals, you can look at what you rang each week. Part of your organisation and planning is communications and follow-up. There's a bit of an email down here, which is what, I'll say it, I've tried to blank out who they are, but I think you can more or less see that that's Cambridge U's, ringing at Great St Mary's. They send out a monthly update, the tower captain does, and it's quite good to have this kind of formal roundup. It records what they've done and also what they're planning for the next month. Now, they have a really busy practice night, and with 12 bells, you can't get many touches in an hour. So this sort of thing saves precious time for ringing. And it has the added benefit that it keeps in touch with band members who are less regular, makes them feel part of the band. I know of other towers who have Facebook pages or WhatsApp groups to do the same thing. I'm showing one from Great Gransden here. They're very active and post a lot of stuff on Facebook. If I'm implying that you have to be supremely well organised, put the effort into planning, communicate well, follow up on comments and leads, arrange focus practices, special ringing, etc., well, I am. But you don't have to do all of these things and be all of these things.
I need somebody.
Hear that?
Not just anybody. You know I need someone.
Get help. I pinched this slide from Debbie Phipps, who talked on Sunday about reviving a small village practice. She's 16 in her band, and she said that everyone had some sort of role. So as well as things like tower captain, steeplekeeper and all the normal stuff, she had roles like social secretary for non-ringing events, which meant they did picnics, rambles, coffee and cake, etc., as well as things like court appeals and ringing handbells. Now, I don't think you have to have that many roles, but make sure that you don't feel trapped doing it all. Tower captains and ringing masters need to enjoy themselves too. Don't be a martyr. Share. Make sure there's an annual meeting with elected positions, and just imagine the relief you'll feel when you have an assistant ringing master, not only to deputise when you can't be there, but maybe to run some of the ringing during the practice while you sort things out with people sat out. Well, some Facebookers suggested that a person like this can work out who's in the pipeline and what touches are needed if there's a particular busy practice. Also, an assistant ringing master needs to be trained up. Think succession planning. You don't want to be doing this all your life, do you? Train others to stand behind and help learners. Get someone to organise bell handling sessions, simulator time, someone to organise court appeals. Social secretary is a great thing to have and can make such a difference. Sonia Field and Steph Pendlebury recommended having a front of house manager, meeting and greeting. Most roles actually don't need people to be fantastic ringers, so share the load. You just have to ask. I don't know if any of you remember at one of the ringing roadshows, so quite a while back, 2015 maybe, Elva Ainsworth organised a ringing motivation study to find out what kept ringers coming ringing. People had to pick out statements they agreed with. Now I can remember ticking the statement, "I like beer." And then I asked Elva later if that rated highly, and apparently it did. And what it represented was the social side of ringing. A band needs to go on outings, dinners, and enjoy their time together. This came out earlier, didn't it, with my 8-bell tower and their 31 ringers. The main thing my correspondent got out of the practice was spending time with people she liked. And that's obvious, but we don't always think about enabling it. Simple things like always welcoming everyone coming in the ringing room door, local band, as well as visitors, making it fun, chocolate, lively, interesting, but not too noisy. Relaxed, encourage friendly banter. I personally think it's essential to have a good debrief in the pub after the practice. Remember, I ticked the "I like beer" statements. Learning environment. Some bands don't seem to want to learn anything, and I don't understand that. Sonia's research highlighted that this was something that strongly motivated people in the early to middle stages of ringing. But I've been ringing for 45 years, and I'm loving how ringing room practices have given me more opportunity to learn to conduct, because nobody else wants to. Well, really, I'm Bob calling, but hey. My mission in a practice is to give people the opportunities I think they need to progress with whatever aspect of ringing they want to pursue, and that's everyone. It's a mutual support system though, and in return they give me that engagement, and they look things up and get up willingly to ring when asked. What you're after is enthusiasm, but for that you need everybody on board with your plan of how to take them from A to B. It comes back to planning in the end to achieve a good learning atmosphere. And get the rest of the band to help you with the learning. Train them up in being excellent standers behinders, or whatever the word is. ART Module 2 spends some time on this. Good standing behind is an art. I'm sure you agree. Not everybody's good at it, but you can help people be better at it. You can't do it all, and recognizing people's different learning styles, you should realize that sometimes you're not the best person to stand behind someone. There's someone in my town who just tells me to shut up when I stand behind him because I say too much. It puts him off. So I get someone more suitable to stand behind him. Standing behind us, they need to be positive and timely, with a good understanding of when and what to say and how much to say, obviously. Make sure that anybody conducting leaves the stander behind her to look after the learner, so the learner isn't subjected to contradictions or, even worse, shouting. Any learners and other people standing out can be set listening tasks or roadside tasks while they're waiting, but you need someone to stand with them and explain what they're looking for. You can't do this all yourself whilst running the practice. But with a learning environment, you can enlist your band to do their bit to help the others learn. Look after your black zone ringers too, if you've got any. Even able ringers like to learn something, and you have to work out what will stretch them. It could be helping you to teach handling and bell control. A little bit will depend on your situation. One Facebooker said that she'd really enjoyed a practice she went to where she'd had to ring with blindfold on, all facing out, upside down Cambridge and half lead spliced, which sounds a lot of fun. But even if you don't have a band like that, you can make it fun. Take plain bob doubles, for instance. Plain bob isn't boring. Plain bob's for everybody. Yes, you can ring it, but you can call it. You can call it from different bells. You can look for the coursing order. You can get someone to put in a call or two and then someone else to call it round. You can swap a pair of bells over and get someone to call it round. Try ringing original, leaving your learner unaffected. Get people to call that. Have a go at Dixon's. Someone on Facebook recommended that. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot you can do to accommodate different abilities in one touch. So be inventive and plan. Praise and constructive criticism. Now that's quite a topic. You have to actually make sure that individuals and your band have done something right. They know they've done something right. So often there's silence. The only time the stander behind the bad stander behind her might say something is when the learner's done something wrong. They should be saying something as soon as the learner has done something right. They don't magically know what good bell ringing is. It has to be pointed out to them, and just after it's happened, not later in the pub. But don't give false praise. People can always tell. Don't shout or belittle anybody or get personal for any reason, ever. This is a big no-no. It's one of the most frequent reasons for people giving up ringing or leaving a band. It's terrible to be the subject of it, and it's really uncomfortable to witness. Anyway, it's not allowed for COVID reasons these days. Maybe face masks will lead to better behaviour of tower captains, eh? Similarly, non-specific criticism of a piece of ringing, such as saying, "That was rubbish," at the end of a touch. It's pretty detrimental to the overall atmosphere. It's almost as bad as a complete silence, with everybody wondering, was it me? As someone leading the practice, you need to put your finger on something specific that needs to be improved about that touch, and then practice just that thing. So often, practices I visit are just a succession of methods being wrong, mostly successfully, but sometimes not, and nothing is said or done apart from going on to the next method. This is a ringing practice you're running, so practice what needs practicing. For example, you might have just rung some Stedman and had inconsistent leading. So typical thing is a dropped hand stroke lead in the slow sixes. So leading it back in hand, they lead too quickly with a hand stroke. You could point out to the band that the touch had good rhythm and was the right speed. So you said something good about it, accurately good. But we need to work on getting the leading right and with the correct hand stroke gap. Therefore, we're going to ring some rounds and call changes right now, but after that, we're going to do some wrong hunting so we can all practice leading correctly at back in hand. And we're all going to do that so that you take action and try and get people to understand what you want in a timely way after the ringing has happened. Don't just say what's wrong, but try and do something about it. We need to have an environment where we can accept criticism and are allowed to make mistakes, but we don't want blame. arguments and nasty post-mortems. Similarly, if a touch was good, say it was and why. Enjoy the success as a team. The job of tower captain is more about understanding the way people tick and how to get the best out of people than it is about bell ringing knowledge. But you have to be decisive and know what your standards are. Just going to have a quick slurp here. Performance is important. A number of Facebookers said that they liked it when the practice had one showpiece with the most able ringers producing a piece of really nice striking. One Facebook comment was, "I'd rather ring good rounds than craps by surprise." And I think many would agree with that. I can remember ringing at Worcester Cathedral, shown here, and feeling right on edge with the tower captain stood in the middle, listening and looking, and you didn't want him to look at you. And the able ringers put as much care and attention into ringing rounds and call changes as the youngsters. But are village towers any different from these figurehead towers like Worcester and York? Shouldn't we all be aiming to achieve perfect striking?
4, 5.
Oops. Certainly some villages in the West Country seem to expect good striking of all their ringers and get what they're after. I'm hard pushed to find any faults in the YouTube videos that Ryan Trout posts on posts. Call changes is not a poor relation to methods. Good striking is just that, whatever the touch or piece of ringing. So make sure you value it as much as anything else. Anne Rogers on Facebook went as far as to say she thought that undervaluing call changes was one of the main reasons that people left ringing. Rounds and call changes might become much more our bread and butter now than it was prior to COVID. ART have responded to this by having producing a version of learning of the ropes for call changes, and I think that's in preparation. But whatever you're ringing, make sure you have standards and people get to know what standards are expected. Ring well, whatever level you're at. Enjoy and praise good striking and leave the practice feeling good about it. Here are some suggestions for things you can do in your practice. We already talked about theme practice on striking. How about holding a striking competition in your practice? We did this with the kids. They had to select bands, get someone to call it, and teaching them how to mark the striking actually made us explain very explicitly what we're looking for or listening for. It's really good. This Claire McCardle mentioned learning a sequence of call changes. So everybody knew what they were going to do and you could focus on good, clean changes and good striking. It's really nice to do and satisfying. We can't ignore the fact that we've just had a year off tower bell ringing. So what difference has it made? Other people are talking about this in more detail, so I'll only mention a little about it here in the context of how it shapes your practice. So take advantage of the fact that learning stuff has become normal, especially for bands that have used ringing room. Zoom allows you to share a screen and help people with able, or what we're looking at here is plain hunt. So you can do a really useful session with 2 or 3 people in less than half an hour. One-to-one tuition. Consider carrying out a practice using ringing room with just one person. And then you can make sure they've got the knowledge and the understanding ready for them to face a particular thing in the tower. So don't leave it to the night. Older learners particularly don't like to feel a fool in front of everybody else. So going through it beforehand can help them. and you can have a really good session. It's really valuable. But the sessions I've done, I know then that people have got a really good grasp of whatever it is. Here I've got Gerard on the 7th and Wheatley on the rest of the bells, and I think I was ringing touches of Grancer, loads and loads of bobs and singles, and I knew that he'd absolutely got it nailed at the end of that, and he's not going to be the weak link when we get back in the tower. Sounds like a big commitment doing one-to-one tuition, but we're only talking about the odd session, not an ongoing regular practice, and the payoff is potentially huge. So think about doing that. Focus on rope sight. I'm hoping that bands that have been occupied by ringing room practices will know what good striking and good leading sound like, but they won't be able to immediately see their ropes amongst all the rest. You need to focus quite a lot when we get back in the tower on helping them with the rope sight. So things like covering, so things like Stedman doubles, all those nice little methods that ART have for this. Basto, Visto, Cloisters, Penultimus. It'd be really interesting to see how quickly we can get the ringing room learners up to speed with the tower bell skills. Things like this little video I'm showing here, done by Art, are really useful. It uses Krista Cordova's ideas, I think, on slowing Abel right down and watching the moving ringer's view. It's really worth watching. There's an article in Ringing World by Heather Peachy, another of my favourite teachers, on developing rope sight. That was published just before lockdown, I think, at the end of January 2020. So use these as well as working on it in the tower. Basically, I'm saying don't just pretend lockdown hasn't happened. We've had some great experiences during this last year, and we've now got a lot more at our fingertips in terms of tools and techniques. Don't just go back to what you did before. Blended learning is the posh teacher's term for this. Bit of online, a bit of practical. Krista Cordova is a great teacher and comes up with really thoughtful ideas for tackling individual ringers' problems. And she recently had a Facebook post about teaching an individual to hear the treble leading and lying using Ringing Room at Wheatley. Slowed right down. Got 5 hours speed here. I don't know how slow it goes. It's given us new tools and techniques lockdown, so use them and get someone else to use them if you can't do it all. Catch up with bell handling training. Have some tied bell practices, little and often, to get the handling good again, and as an excuse to address the faults people had previously. Practice raising and lowering, because this is something that people always worry about, and think about goals around bell control and striking using a tied bell hooked up to a simulator. You've really got to carefully plan your first few practices in the tower and make them good. People need to want to come back for more. They might have other things they've been doing this last year and they're out of the habit of coming to a practice. You have to sell it to them. But, as I say at the bottom, stay flexible. You might actually be capable of more than you think. Many 6-bell bands have been ringing on 8, 10 and 12 on Ringing Room. So you want to take advantage of this kind of brain expanding stuff. They might get on to hearing their place in the row on 6 much more quickly than you think. Don't just ignore the fact that lockdowns taught them this and keep these learners on the same time scale, same timeline that you were used to. So how many people have read Laura Goodin's lesson plans on Ringing Room about how to get absolute beginners to plain hunt on 8 in 4 half-hour sessions? That's the sort of background to this. So stay sharp. You might actually want to move on quicker than you expected. Finally, keep interested, keep learning yourself. You need to enjoy it too. Nobody's going to have fun if you don't. So work out your own ringing goals and work to achieve them too. And hopefully one of your goals is to run a better practice. So thank you very much for your time this evening. And thanks very much to everybody that I've quizzed on Facebook and directly for their ideas and input. I'm going to leave you with a kind of top 10 here things that you can practically do straight away. You're probably doing a lot of them anyway. But please enjoy your forthcoming tower bell practices and the ringing room practices you're doing now, if you already are. And thank you very much.
Lesley, thank you very much. That was excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
The time seemed to fly past. You gave us so many good ideas.
Oh, I'm almost at an hour. Sorry, I've gone on too long.
It was super.
Should I stop sharing?
Yes, please. There we go. Welcome back. Not a lot on the chat tonight, except about this app called Band, Vicky.
Yeah, so on your smartphone, you can download this app called Band, and providing that you've got reasonably tech-savvy people, and you get them all to you can set up your tower as a band and have all of your ringing contacts in there, and you can set things like you can put the dates in of your practices or special ringing or whatever, so people can tell you whether they're available or not. But you can also use it as a bit of a social chat as well. You can put postings to it. You can add photos and you know, documents and snippets and stuff. It's a bit like a social media platform, but just for your very tight specific. But it's really good for sort of keeping in touch with your band and organising your practices and your additional sessions and stuff, and just seeing who's around. People have mentioned, well, you know, there's doodle polls as well. You can set up a doodle poll. There's other sort of diary type apps and spreadsheets that you could have, that you could get people to just kind of indicate their availability over the next, you know, few weeks. So that helps you do all of that planning that Lesley was talking about. So again, you know, there's tools out there to help you with that even.
Smashing, thank you.
That's good.
Lesley, that was excellent. Do we have any questions from anybody in the audience that they'd like to put to Lesley? Can you see anything, Colin?
No, I can't see anything.
Just one quick question. You sometimes get professional learners. I mean, is there any way around this?
Say a bit more, Tony. What do you mean by professional learners?
They take, well, I've seen some people learning bob doubles, and they've been learning it for the last 20 or 30 years. And it doesn't seem to go any further.
Well, I think there are probably things you can suggest to them, or ways of breaking down bob doubles. Bob doubles isn't always the best method to learn with. And is the problem rope sight or bell handling or what? But there are other methods that do things like, you know, basto, hunting up to seconds and back, you know, getting people to achieve something. I would say try something different if they've been doing bob doubles for years. That's if they want to learn.
Yeah, that's perhaps one of the things, you know, they're normally older people. And what they want to learn, I don't know. They seem to want to learn. They come along to practices, but don't seem to learn anything. They seem to be stuck on just one.
Yeah, I don't think there's any guarantee that older people take longer and younger people take less time. That it goes both ways. I think Birmingham School of Ringing have produced some interesting stats on that. So you know, don't make assumptions, but it is sometimes, I guess, Tony, difficult to winkle out from them what they want to do and what they find difficult.
And perhaps it might just be worth having that conversation with them. And you know, if they appear to have been stuck on the same thing for years, and you've tried different alternatives, different methods, breaking it down, taking a step back, starting to build it up from a different starting point, and they're still not getting it, maybe it's time to have that honest conversation with them and say, look, I don't think you're going to progress anymore. However, you are still an incredibly valued member of our band, and you know, we would love you to keep coming because you are useful. You know, if they're the sorts of people that turn up every Sunday without fail, you want those people, and they might never progress. And you know, I knew a guy who only ever tenor behind but he turned up every time, and that was, you know, you knew he was going to be there, and that was absolutely, you know, a good thing to know. He wanted to learn things, but he just didn't have the capacity to do it. And we had that conversation, and you know, he acknowledged that, and he said, look, I'm happy to come along. I'm happy to come and see everybody. I want to participate. I'm happy sticking on the tenner. And if he was happy with that, then, you know, everyone's a winner.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank
I see Lesley has her hand up.
Yes, the other Lesley. I was interested in your comments about goals and setting goals, and how as a ringing teacher you should try and be setting goals to help people you know, progress in ringing. Interestingly, over the past, well, I would say a couple of years, but it's probably 3 years if you take account of the COVID year, missing year, I've seen 3 people leave bands, not because they didn't think they were being progressed enough, but because they had progressed as far as they wanted to. And the bands itself, the bands themselves were actually, you know, quite advanced method ringing bands, and these people were saying, actually, I can get plain hunt, but I don't think I can get a method. And I'm very happy with that, but the band itself wasn't happy with it, and eventually those people left, and I felt that was a real shame.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, I say that to Tony as well. If the subtext is that your band is aiming for everybody to ring Cambridge Surprise Minor or something, and that's seen as the highlight of the evening, then people will feel inadequate and disappointed if they can't get there. But actually, if the band celebrates as much, bringing really good call changes or kaleidoscope exercises or having fun with some of these games, then they can feel equally valued. You need to, I think these days, having the attitude that we're all aiming to ring surprise doesn't really work. You need to enjoy and get a lot out of the simpler stuff, struck really well. Celebrate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Lesley. Lesley Belcher, that is. Do we have any more questions?
I think Phil Gay
I think
is
Phil
waving
Gay
at
is
us.
waving. Yes. Hello,
Hello,
Phil.
this is more a comment than a question, an observation. I was interested to hear you mention that ART is emphasising the importance of prime rings, because I can claim credit for actually being the person who introduced that concept.
Oh, right.
Back in the early 1990s, when I was on the Central Council Education Committee, at one of its annual courses, I was the tutor for the Tower Captains module, and I wrote a document which I can make available if you want me to, called Objectives and Constraints, and it was about the underlying principles for organising a good practice session. And
Well,
I introduced there the concept of the prime ring. And
well, ART have adopted that and
well, I'm
taken it
pleased to hear
forward,
that.
and we owe you a lot, Phil. Thank you.
And you know, one of the things I used to reckon, and I mentioned in that document, is that a good objective for running a practice to give everybody a good go was firstly that everybody should have 2 prime rings, building on the fact that you say doing it the second time is always more productive than doing it the first time. And also, I thought there should be a sitting out constraint, that nobody should sit out for more than 2 touches in a row. Now that requires quite a lot of ingenuity, but you can usually achieve it by giving people good secondary rings, like calling call changes or ringing the tenor behind. And I reckon that at a 6-bell tower in a 90-minute session with 10 or 12 people there, that is achievable if you follow all the suggestions which you've been making for doing it efficiently. And the other thing I'd like to mention is your suggestion of shadowing, because I do quite a lot of that. I use a simulator quite a lot. We have a progression in our tower that people are taught bell handling on a 1-to-1 basis. And then on a Tuesday night, I run a learner's practice, which is entirely simulator based. We've got simulator on all our bells, so we can have a second practice without upsetting the neighbours. And they progress to that practice. And then when I think they're ready, they progress to Sunday ringing and the main loud band practice. But I found that a good way of developing the bell handling skills, which are necessary not just for plain hunting, but for method ringing, you know, for learning how to dodge properly and learning how to do treble bob, that shadowing is very, very valuable. So I put the learner on a bell which is totally silenced, and I ring what I call the live bell for a touch, which is a simulator with a bell sounding, and I get them to shadow me. And you can get them counting places out loud and all sorts of things which might not be easily achievable if you were doing it in a conventional way. And then you can move on from that once they can ring the speed, which is the essential bell handling skill necessary for most of these things. Once they can do that, you can move on to them actually doing it by them ringing the live bell and learning to ring with the simulator. And you know, in many ways, I think rope sight is a much overrated concept. People have to be able to learn to get their bell in the right place, and rope sight really is confirmation that it's in the right place rather than the way of getting it in the right place.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a
way
very
of
good
putting
point.
it.
Thanks very much, Phil. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Colin, can you see any other hands up?
I can see no hands up at the
No
moment,
hands
Danny.
up.
No.
Okay.
Oh no,
Mandy's waving.
there's some.
Mandy,
Mandy
Mandy,
Charles is
Mandy.
waving.
Sorry, Mandy, do you have a question for us, please?
You're muted, Mandy.
Okay. Lesley, is odd leading, I presume that slow hand stroke, quick, what's it? Where we would pull the backstroke in, is it the other way round? Do you do it the other way round?
No, we're always looking for a hand stroke gap and no gap at backstroke. That's if we're not in the West Country or doing cartwheel ringing. So for something like Steadman, where you are doing a whole turn, you lead at hand and back, and then you have a point in seconds, and then you lead at back and hand. And often that second part isn't struck very well because it takes more bell control.
I see.
Hold your bell up.
I'd just like to tell you our learners love the in the bucket and hit the tin job.
Good.
We're all very competitive.
Thank you, Mandy.
All right.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. So on behalf of us all, can I thank Lesley again? It was brilliant. Thank you, Lesley.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Brilliant.
And thank you everybody for attending. I hope you found it useful. Can I remind you that we have 2 more talks, one tomorrow evening, and then we have the beer tasting on Friday. So get your pints in. I have had 1 or 2 questions about ringing recovery champions. If anybody wants more information, then please do write to us, and we can send you all the documentation or the different papers that we've prepared. But we're not a secret society, which somebody asked me if we were. We are open and looking for anybody and everybody to join. So if anybody wants any more details, please do get in touch. But thank you once again, Lesley Boyle and Lesley, for doing all the organising. Haven't missed anything, Vicky?
No, don't think so. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks everybody, and have a good evening and see you tomorrow.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye now.